Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they're from God. Because many false prophets have gone out into the world. And this is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. But every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming and even now is already in the world. Now, why in the world does John care whether Jesus came as a physical being or whether he just came as a spiritual being? What's the big deal? Well, here's the big deal. If Jesus doesn't have a body, then he can't bleed on that cross. And the Bible teaches without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. Someone innocent has to pay the price for the wrongs that we've done to a holy God. And this is the way it was all the way in the beginning. You know the story. Adam and Eve were placed in the Garden of Eden. God says, enjoy anything you want in the garden, just stay away from this one tree. In Genesis chapter 3 opens up, Eve standing next to the tree, Adam standing next to her. She wants a fruit snack break. She takes some, she gives it to him, and all hell breaks loose on our earth. Adam and Eve realize they've done wrong. They realize that they've sinned, and so they go and they hide. And God calls out for them, Adam, where are you? God already knows where they are. He wants them to come clean. And finally, they muster up their courage and they come out and they say, oh, we blew it. And God says, explain yourself. And Adam blames Eve and Eve blames the serpent, and we've been blaming each other ever since. God killed an animal, didn't he? And the skin of the animal was used to cover the nakedness and the shame of Adam and Eve. Someone innocent had to die. Their blood had to be shed so they could be forgiven of their sins. All throughout the Old Testament, there's a sacrificial system that talks about how if you wanted to be forgiven of your sin, you had to bring in an animal. You would bring a lamb in, and the lamb was to be without blemish, and you would offer that lamb as a sacrifice for your sins, and the priest would take that lamb and he would kill that lamb, and the blood of the lamb would be poured upon the altar, and the blood of the lamb would cover over your sins. John says, listen, you've heard about Gnosticism, that Jesus only came as a spirit being, but not as a body. But I walked with Jesus. I talked with Jesus. I was there the day he was crucified. And I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jesus did have a body, and his blood was shed on that cross. Blood poured from his brow, where a crown of thorns had been squashed into his brain. Blood poured from his hands and from his feet, from his side. Blood poured from his back and his chest after he'd been whipped and beaten. Oh, friends, the cross was a bloody, awful mess. And never forget when you think about the cross of Jesus that should be you, that should be me. He hasn't done anything wrong. He's dying in our place. He's shedding his blood so that we might be forgiven of our sin. Those nails in his hands and feet should be in our hands and feet. That crown of thorns upon his head should be upon our head. And so John says, listen, you better test the spirits, because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to come and they're going to tell you one thing and they're going to give you a little bit of truth, but they're going to surround it with a whole bunch of nonsense. Don't you dare buy into the lie.